Hi guys, the patch notes for the Vocation Rebalance 2026 are fully available now, so we know exactly what is coming with the rebalance in a few days, maybe a couple of weeks. And in this video, we will break down all of the night changes. So first of all, worth saying is I am a primarily focused solo player, so the video will mostly be concerning solo EK. However, we're also obviously going to touch a little bit on team hunt stuff. And the plan for the video is that it's going to be split into two sections. The first section is for people who didn't really follow the test server, so we're just going to go through the patch notes start to finish for everything that affects the EK. And then in the second part of the video, probably after like 15 minutes or so, you'll be able to find it in the timestamps below. In the second part of the video, we'll actually do more of a deep dive into the new spells, the new wheels that we might expect to get, some new rotations, some new multi-action hotkeys, stuff like that. So that's basically the plan for the video. I hope you enjoy it, and let's dive in. Okay, so first let's start looking at all of the patch notes that affect the EK. So let's just go from start to finish. First of all, we have AoE rune adjustments. This doesn't really affect EK too much because, you know, EKs don't use many runes, but sometimes you use some runes for kiting. So worth knowing that all of the runes are now have the same base power. So thunderstorms and stone showers are just as strong as avalanches and great fireballs. So maybe that will affect which runes you choose to carry with you. However, not a huge bit for the EK. Charm double proc is not relevant for the EK either. Gift of life improvement. You'll now get maximum mana as part of the gift life proc as well. Not all that relevant, but good to know. Group EXP bonus. Duos are better. That might be relevant for EKs. I know a lot of EKs historically liked duo hunting with like druids, for example. Now maybe with like monks or sorcerers as well. Anyway, slightly more experience for you. Combat mode removal. This means like the offensive, balanced, and defensive stance that used to exist in the game forever has been fully removed. And basically now what it means is that everybody is by default in the offensive stance. Now this may seem, you know, the attack value of all characters has been increased by 20%. That may seem like it's a buff, but it's actually irrelevant. This is because the base values that they're treating as is the balanced state. So if you were in an offensive stance as an EK before the rebalance, which, you know, you probably were 99% of the time, this is not actually relevant. Your attack value is exactly the same as it was before the rebalance. It's just that now everybody by default is in the old offensive stance. And yeah, basically shields and spellbooks have had increased defense value to compensate for that because there's no more, the defensive stance is gone. So basically you get a little bit more defensive values on your shield and spellbook, so a little bit more mitigation, etc. That's basically all that's changed. You just don't have the option of offensive, balanced, and defensive stance anymore, which is pretty much a good thing because they weren't that fun. Then we have the mitigation adjustments here. There's you basically get a little bit more mitigation for the formula. Nothing I want to get into too much. The big point here that you do want to pay attention to is that the gems that provide mitigation multipliers, they have always been a bit of a meme. You wouldn't really want to use them. However, they have been so buffed fourfold. So they've gone from, an upgraded one goes from 7.5% to 30%. And actually at 30%, it's actually good now. An EK, like a high level EK with best in slot has like 3% mitigation, something like that. A 30% mitigation multiplier, that means you get 0.9% extra mitigation per mitigation gem, which is actually a lot because mitigation works against everything except like agony damage. So every lesser gem will give you like a 0.9% flat damage reduction against everything. You have like 3 or 4 of those, and that's like a 4% damage reduction across the board against everything. Amazing. Really, really versatile. You know, that works against life drain. It works against physical damage, works against everything. Now, it's not as strong as like a specific elemental resistance gem for like a particular spot. Like if you go Cobras, an earth protection elemental gem will still technically win out, but the mitigation ones are extremely versatile, and you're going to be extremely happy to have those, and they will work basically everywhere. So bottom line, the mitigation gems are actually really good now. That's the key thing to take away. Then we have a potion management improvement. So this is also another big one for the EKs. First of all, you get access to great mana potions just for free now. So basically from level 8, you have great mana potions. That becomes your new default mana potion. Mana management is a lot easier. However, in addition to this, you also get even better potions. You get distilled superior mana potions and distilled ultimate mana potions. This means you get access to these superior and ultimate mana potions at a 50% premium. So distilled superior mana potion it's a new mana potion. Superior mana potion is a new potion at level 100. It's a little bit better than a great mana potion, but nothing too crazy. And ultimate mana potion, those are the ones that the mages have had for years, is the level 130 for a mage, but I think EK can only use it. The distilled ultimate mana potions are usable, I think, from level 200. So you'll be able to get those at level 200, and you basically get ultimate mana potions. However, they do cost 50% more gold, which is a lot, and they're expensive. So you don't necessarily want to be using those all the time. I think the default going forward for an EK will be to just use your great mana potions. And when you're on like in an emergency, you really want to top up your mana, or you really don't care about profit, then you just use the distilled ultimate mana potions. And let me tell you, mana management is a non-issue when you use distilled ultimate mana potions. So something to check out for sure. Much more comfortable. Even the great mana potions generally are more or less enough, though, for the EK. Very, very nice change. So if you didn't like mana management, there you go. Big improvements for you. Energy ring adjustment is not really relevant for the EK. Ultimate and intense healing rune adjustment, not really relevant. Just something to keep in mind that sorcerer will not be able to UH you in a team hunt anymore. Stance quality of life. So active stances now persist between sessions instead of resetting to the default stance. So this is important for you for the EK stance changes that we'll find out in a minute. So basically your stance will persist between logins. That's mostly what you want to care about. And now we can jump into the EK specific changes. And first of all, we have the stances change, which for me is probably the best change. Actually, this is almost the two best like quality of life changes we get is the stances and the new mana potions. I think the stances even win out. But basically what happens is you now get your stances in the similar way how the monk has his virtues. You just pop it, you use it, and it's active permanently. Now you have this for Blood Rage and Protector. So obviously you get your Blood Rage, which I think has been slightly changed. Now it's 30% instead of 35%, but it also scales your equipment bonuses. So bottom line, it ends up being about the same, about 35% overall. And you use Blood Rage and you just have it on permanently, right? Forever. You don't need to cast it every 10 seconds. Very, very comfortable. Means you don't have a cooldown clash with something like Exeter. My go-to example for this place is Nightmare Kralos on a low level. I remember it was a real pain in the ass that you would cast Utito and the Nightmare Scions would start running away because you couldn't cast Exeter because you were in a group support cooldown. No more. Now you can just cast Exeter every 2 seconds. No problem. Very, very comfortable. Super good. In addition to this, we also have the Protector, which is the defensive stance. Even more defensive now because it gets you some shielding, which actually now contributes to your healing as well, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. And also they improved the damage done. Previously, it was reducing damage taken by 15% and reducing damage done by 30%, but they reduced the damage done reduction that you do from 30 to 15. So you actually do more damage in Protector now than you did before. So that's good as well. You definitely want to hotkey both of those stances because if you're like in a box and you can tell that you're like dying, then switching from Blood Rage to Protector is definitely the way to go. You're very, very tanky in the Protector stance now. So very, very nice. Very, very big quality of life update. This one. Yep, so that's the stances. Mana cost adjustments. Some of your spells were increased in mana cost a little bit. This is to offset the fact that you no longer need to cast Blood Rage, the Utito spell. So basically, yeah, it's still better, right? The full cost of the mana offset is still less than the cost of Utito. So mana management, again, even easier. Moving on, you have two new spells, Shield Bash and Shield Slam. Those are available only when you're wearing a shield. First one, Shield Bash, is a single target spell. It has a 4-second cooldown available from level 18. So there are two use cases for this one. First of all, this makes low-level EK a lot more comfortable because, at a very low level, like level 20, level 30, EK is really useless. He basically has no spells. He's basically just auto-attacking. Now, every 4 seconds, he has this new spell, which is pretty nice. So your level like 18 to level 50 is going to be much more comfortable with the spell. In addition to this, you can also use it for bossing. It reduces the damage of the target's next auto attack within 10 seconds by 50%. So it's pretty nice for like reducing some damage from the boss. So if you are not the main damage dealer at like a boss hunt or whatever, then you could consider adding this in your rotation against the boss to make the damage a little bit less. Not sure if people will end up doing that. I think primarily it's just a nice low level progression spell. Other than this, we have a Shield Slam, which is a new actual useful spell. It's a spell that hits everything around you, so it's just like Ixori. It deals damage based on the defense value of your shield and reduces the damage of the target's next auto attack within 10 seconds by 50%. This can be further increased by 75% in the wheel. And let me tell you that this is an amazing defensive option. So this is something that you have to keep in mind. Damage of this spell is, first of all, always physical. Doesn't take on the elemental damage of your weapon. So keep that in mind. It's always physical. Physical damage, not so great unless you have loads of armor penetration. And anyway, the base power of this is not that big anyway. But the key thing is this is a very powerful defensive effect. Every 6 seconds, this is a 6-second cooldown, you can reduce the next auto of your enemy by 50%, which is huge. Believe me that this is very, very impactful. You really feel this. So you would use this in like a defensive setup, right? If you're team hunting and you're kind of low level for the hunting ground, you pop the shield slam every 6 seconds. Great. It's really, really good. Now, it's not a very good offensive option. So if you're going for experience per hour, solo, for example, you probably don't want to use it, but it is a very, very good defensive option if you have a shield equipped and you can see that you're losing health and you're going to die. Start popping shield slam every 6 seconds and it gets a lot easier. So yeah, very good defensive option. Moving on to healing adjustments, we've also had a quite significant change to the way healing works on the EK. Now, some people are not so happy about it, but I don't really see why. I think it's a great change overall, and I'm very happy with them. Basically, all you need to know is that healing spells are now got a 2-second cooldown across the board instead of 1 second, but they are more or less twice to 2.5 times as powerful. So you basically gain a little bit more healing overall, except you need to cast it half as often, which is easier to use. And also, in addition to this, healing now scales with magic level and shielding. That means the base powers have to be adjusted. But, more or less, it's better. Like, you do heal more on average, and you have to heal a little bit more rarely every 2 seconds instead of 1 second. So that's good, in my opinion. If you want to remove Paralyze, you just cast a haste spell in between the healing spells, so you can still remove Paralyze every second if needed. In addition to this, we also got Intense Wound Cleansing, big buff. The cooldown has been reduced from 10 to 2 minutes. That's an 80% reduction. So now it's an actually fairly good emergency heal that you can use every 2 minutes. That's pretty often, and it's a huge heal. So you may want to consider having that on either multi-hotkey. Definitely keep track of it and do actually use it. Every 10 minutes, it was a bit too long, but every 2 minutes, it's actually often enough that you should be using that in your rotation, more or less. So yeah, kind of good. Interesting to see. I'm pretty happy with those healing changes overall. Some other changes, we have existing spell improvements. We have a ranged accepted improvement. We have jump range has been increased to 7, which is, I don't remember what the previous jump range was. I think it was like 5 maybe, so it's pretty big change. And hits an additional target. So ranged accepted should feel a lot better now. I think it's a very good change too. And now we move on to some front sweep changes, which is actually a very significant one. So we have a front sweep base power increase from 72 to 80, which is a 10% base power increase. And then in the augments in the wheel, the first augment now grants 40% base power. So it goes from 80 to 112. And you also, the second augment, have increased shape to hit 2 additional squares to the side of your character for a total of 5 affected squares. Bottom line of this is, like, with this 40% base power in the wheel 1, Exori Mint becomes like your strongest hitting spell by far. And it leeches a ton as well. The way leech formula works, hard hitting spells leech a lot. Basically, bottom line is, front sweep, Exori Mint is actually finally viable again and really, really good. And honestly, it's probably replacing Ground Shake in all rotations. I think the new rotation will be Exori Ground, Exori Mint. That's going to be your go-to offensive rotation. Exori Mass, maybe you'll still be using, at like very, very high level where most of the power comes from the charm activations. But for like low level, this front sweep buff is insane. I tested it on like my 200 EK and oh my God, amazing. Really, this 40% base power on the front sweep, really, really good. Amazing for leech as well. Don't sleep on it. Very, very good. And we have the Shield Slam, which is the defensive AoE spell, which you have some extra damage reduction in the second augment and some more life leech in the first augment. They're pretty interesting, but nothing too crazy overall. Then we have a Ground Shaker change where augment 1 and augment 2 have been switched. This is a buff to Ground Shaker, so you actually do get the -2 second cooldown reduction by just picking up 1 augment. So less of an investment to get a 6-second Ground Shaker. But like I just said, I actually don't anticipate that Ground Shaker will be all that popular anymore. I do think Front Sweep basically replaces it, so I don't think this is actually as big of a change as it seems. Moving on, we also have a Battle Healing rework, which increases the effect of your healing spells by 10%. And this bonus is tripled while wearing a shield. So when you're wearing a shield, your healing effects are 30% more, right? That's really, really good. Where your healing is already pretty damn good with the changes that way they have made. Extra 30%, you're very, very tanky. Definitely something to consider for like a team hunt situation. If you're just the main blocker, you don't need to be doing all that much damage. You just care about the survivability. Pretty nice for that. And finally, we have another huge, huge change. Combat Mastery, the bottom left Revelation perk has been fully reworked. And it reads as following. Take less damage the lower your life is. 1% reduced damage taken per 10, 12, 10, 8% missing HP. This bonus is doubled while wielding a shield. So just an example, if you have 50% of your health, so you're on like 50% health, you're on like yellow health, and you have tier 2 combat mastery, you take 5% reduced damage taken less, right? Because it's 1% per 10%, so you have 5% reduced damage taken, just flat out across the board, right? And this is doubled while wearing a shield. So with a shield, you're taking 10% less damage just across the board when you're at half health. And, when you're on 75% health, you'll be taking like 2 or 3% less. And as you're dropping, you're almost dying. This is increasing. And that's a very significant damage reduction just across the board. It's always active. Even when you're not wearing a shield, you have the basic active damage reduction. And it also works on the other side. You deal more damage, the lower your target's life is. So you have 1% increased damage per 12, 10, 8% missing HP against monsters, and this bonus is doubled while wielding a two-handed weapon. So, on average, more or less across the board, the monster will have 50% life throughout its health. You can kind of make that assumption. So again, tier 2 combat mastery, you're going to be doing 5% more damage to a monster on average, or 10% more damage while wearing a two-handed weapon. It's going to be a little bit less than that in practice because, you kind of kill it at like 20%, one-shot it, whatever. It's probably going to be approximately like a 4% damage increase on average in one-handed start with a shield, or an 8% damage increase while wearing a two-handed weapon. So you basically just straight up get like an 8% damage buff just from having combat mastery. That is amazing. That is really strong. And you also get the reduced damage taken. So honestly, this is like probably potentially the best perk in the game now. This maybe with like the beam mastery for the sorcerer are like incredible. Really, really, really good. I'm not so sure that this is not going to see some nerf in the future. I mean, this is honestly really good. And I do think that basically combat mastery becomes the go-to revelation perk going forward for the EKs, but more about that in a second. Anyways, that's the patch notes. For patch notes, let's jump on over to the presentation now. Okay, welcome to the presentation part of the video. So let's just dive straight in. So first of all, we've got the new spells. Now, I actually spoke quite a lot about those during the patch notes reading because just reading those spells basically answers everything that there is to know about us. But just to repeat myself, I think Shield Bash is primarily a low-level spell that helps progressing your low-level EKs on low levels. Like level 18, you unlock it. It becomes a 4-second cooldown. Nice spell. Very, very nice for low-level EKs. Might be okay for bossing as well, but I don't expect this to be like a game-changing ability. Probably gonna kind of forget about it after a few weeks. Shield Slam is an excellent defensive option. You do want to be using that if you're full team hunting. I think in a team hunt situation, the EK probably goes for a Shield Slam build, and you go like Ixori Gran, Ixori Min, Shield Slam as your rotation, something like that. We'll see exactly. We'll see exactly if that changes. It kind of depends. Like using two-handed weapons and going for a DPS rotation is still going to be the best option for experience. So if you're hunting somewhere that's pretty easy, then you go for the offensive build. But for example, if you are hunting without a druid, maybe you're hunting with a monk as the main healer and you want to have more of a defensive option, then yeah, you Shield Slam to get a lot of survivability through the reduced auto attack damage from the monsters. Very, very nice. Ultimately, I don't think these spells are like a massive game changer. They're kind of interesting. They're kind of okay. Going to have some niche uses, but I don't think this really changes the gameplay of the EK overall. Moving on, we've got the stances. Again, I mean, I spoke about most of this in the patch notes area, actually. So for this video, at least, the patch notes for the EK were pretty sufficient to cover everything. But just to repeat myself, amazing, amazing changes. You will now be able to switch between Blood Rage and Protect, and they will always stay active, so you don't need to cast it. It's not going to have a support cooldown clash. Very, very nice. In addition, the protected damage reduced. The less damage taken as the EK himself is being increased. So reduced. So rather than having a 30% damage reduction from the damage you deal, it's now only 15%. So you actually do deal 15% more damage when in the protector stance than before. So it is much better. And yeah, overall it's just very, very nice quality of life. This is primarily a quality of life change that I'm super happy about, going to make EK a lot easier. Also going to be a pretty significant buff for low levels, I would say, because on low levels you didn't always have the mana to cast Utito all the time, and the mana pool is pretty low, so it's going to be a very significant bonus for like level 90 to level 200 EK. But yeah, for high levels, it's just in the quality of life mostly. Moving on, builds. Okay, so this is the first sort of area that I want to talk about a little bit more. So we have a couple of new builds that I think are going to potentially be meta. So currently EKs the main meta build is probably going for something like Exori Gran, Exori Mass as your main rotation, with Executioner's Throw as like the finisher in the top right part of the wheel. Executioner's Throw is great, by the way, it's totally great. But we have had amazing significant changes to Exori Min and Combat Mastery, and I do expect and anticipate that Exori Min and Combat Mastery are going to be the go-to wheel after the rebalance. So, for example, if you're like a level 500 EK or so, I expect you to go T2 Combat Mastery, pick up T1 Exori Min while you're at it. And I do think that Exori Min will replace the Ground Shaker. So your rotation will become Exori Gran, Exori Min, and you're just going to be running around in Combat Mastery. I do think it's really incredible, really, really powerful. Now, Executioner's Throw is still excellent. Don't get me wrong. Executioner's Throw is still a very good ability, but I don't think it's better than Combat Mastery. Combat Mastery is just straight up so good as it is. So I actually think what's likely going to be very, very, very valuable in this build is an Executioner's Throw Greater Gem. Executioner's Throw Mastery. So on like a level 500, you could get a Greater Gem, like level 550 or whatever, right? You could get a Greater Gem in the Combat Mastery wheel, get 500 points in there, get a Greater Gem plus tier 2 Combat Mastery. That Greater Gem being the Executioner's Throw Mastery, and then you go into get the T1 Exori Min in the Executioner's Throw quadrant, and you also get T1 Executioner's Throw. And that is probably like the best level 500 setup that you're going to have. If you're higher level, if you're like level 800 or whatever, then you can pick up T2 Combat Mastery and T1 Executioner's Throw, no problem anyway. But I do think T2 Combat Mastery plus tier 1 Exori Min is like the absolute basic build that you're going to be going for on every EK going forward. So I don't expect you move out of the Combat Mastery quadrant until like past level 500 or so, really. So yeah, that's what I think. Very, very good offensively. Very, very good. Long term, you probably will want to pick up that tier 2 front sweep as well, but that is a very, very large investment in the Executioner's Throw quadrant. It's like 700 points, right? 675, I think, points in that quadrant to get the tier 2 front sweep. Eventually, very, very good. But, I think that's realistically going to happen once you have like level 1200 or something, where you're going to have the T2 Combat Mastery, and then you're going to have T2 Executioner's Throw and T2 front sweep. That's like a high level build. Definitely going to be very, very good though. And the other build that I'm anticipating is going to be popular is the new defensive build. Potentially, this is going to be like a team hunting build where you go for the shield slam together with the augments, which will make monsters deal 75% less damage with the auto attacks every 6 seconds. In addition to this, you'll have 15% life leech on the shield, so I'm going to be very defensive. You could couple this with a battle healing perk in the bottom right, which will increase your healing by 30% when wearing a shield. I think this could be like a very good defensive build, either for like some difficult bosses, or maybe if you're in a team hunt situation without a designated healer. So maybe you're in a trio like, I don't know, Paladin, EK, Sorcerer, for example. Like, that's your trio. You don't have a monk, you don't have a druid, you go for like this very defensive build. I think that totally would make sense. Or if you have no druid and you just have a monk, the monk does heal less than a druid, you could consider going for a more defensive build that way. So I do think we have these two new build variants where we have this very offensive Exori Min and Combat Mastery build, and then we have a defensive build with like Shield Slam and Battle Healing potentially. And I think that's yeah, pretty good. Existing builds, I think it's still going to be fine. I still think going for a current build of like Exori Gran, Exori and Exori Mass with Executioner's Throw is still going to be fine, but I think you're kind of going to be gimping yourself by skipping out on Combat Mastery, because I think it's very, very good. And finally, one thing I want to talk about, because I keep getting this question very, very often. Do you now play with two-handers or a one-hander plus shield? So the answer to this is the following. Two-handers still do and always will do significantly more damage. So what this means is two-handers are always going to be better for EXP and damage, okay? So if you can hunt a spot with a two-hander and survive without trouble, two-handers are still the way to go. However, the one-hander with shield, with the new changes to mitigation, with the shield slam ability, with the healing changes, one-hander plus shield is extremely tanky, but you will be dealing a fairly significantly less damage. So the consideration is this. If you are just beginning at a spot, I don't know, you go to Asura Mirror on like a 300 EK, perhaps you want to consider one-hander and shield just to have a little bit of survivability. But once you start getting comfortable at a respawn and you kind of start out-leveling it, say you're a level 400 at an Asura Mirror, then you definitely want to be using two-handers for that extra damage, extra experience. So that is what it is. That is my view on it, at least when it comes to solo. When it comes to team hunting, I think one-hander plus shield is pretty fine for most team hunts. But again, kind of a similar consideration. If you're team hunting somewhere that's, very, very easy for you, I don't know, if you're level like 1k plus hunting library or Nimisats or whatever, then you probably want to be using two-handers. However, if you're a 400 EK, being the main tank at Secret Library, then you probably want to go with one-hand and shield, almost undoubtedly. I mean, you basically do that anyway. It also provides you more elemental protection and imbues and stuff. So, yeah, that's for sure. Another thing maybe worth talking about that's not quite not here yet is but also consideration for two-handers. I do think that two-handers with two imbue slots are going to be better now than they used to be. Previously, 3 imbue weapons were extremely sought after, stuff like Soul and Sanguine weapons, because they helped with the triple imbue. However, after the rebalance, you are going to have great mana potions, you're going to have more sustain. I do think that dropping that third imbue, in this case, void imbue, mana leech imbue, is actually going to be much more manageable. So I do think a lot of the two-handed weapons that people avoided because they only had two imbue slots are now going to be a lot better. So I do think that's just something to keep in mind. I think you can fairly comfortably drop the void imbue from two-handed weapons and just have crit and vamp, because the mana sustain, mana management is going to be a lot easier going forward. So that's something to keep in mind. 3 imbue weapons, still nice. You, of course, if you can get them, you still go crit, vamp, void. But 2 imbue two-handed weapons are still now a lot better than they were historically, because you do not need that void imbue as much as you did in the past. Anyways, moving on. New multi-action button, some suggestions that you could consider. Ixori Grant, Ixori Shield Slam in the defensive build. Maybe switch Ixori for Ixori Min. Depends if you can fit in the Ixori Min augments. But yeah, this is basically a defensive build with one-handed weapon and shield. You could consider multi-action buttoning the Intense Wound Cleansing and Fair Wound Cleansing. So Intense Wound Cleansing is the spell that's now 10 minutes, but it's going to be 2 minutes. You could consider putting it on a multi-action. And so, if you just use it off cooldown, so every 2 minutes you get a big healing boost. I'm not exactly sure I would recommend this. I would recommend you'd rather have Intense Wound Cleansing cooldown on like your Tibia Vision or on top Replica or something like that, and then just use that to know when it's available and use it to heal up as needed, because you wouldn't really want to use Intense Wound Cleansing when you're almost full health. But if you're lazy, if you just want a multi-action button, then that's probably a pretty okay choice to do as well. Then a multi-action of Fair Wound Cleansing Haste for Paralyzed respawn. So again, healing spells are now 2-second cooldown, so you can consider multi-action buttoning those with a haste, so that if you're paralyzed and you've got your healing on a 2-second cooldown, you can still use haste and get yourself out of the paralyze. Yeah, something to consider. And finally, for low-level single target, now we have Shield Bash unlocked at level 18, Brutal Strike, I believe, unlocked at level 16, and Whirlwind Throw, I believe, unlocked at like 20-something. Very good single target. Little rotation you can have. Shield Bash has a 4-second cooldown, Brutal Strike and Whirlwind Throw have a 6-second cooldown, so you can actually have an actual spell rotation on low level. Something to consider. Kind of interesting, I think. Again, not a game changer, right? Obviously, you get level 35, you get your Ixori and thing changes. At level 35, I suppose at level 35, you could have an Ixori Shield Bash rotation. Ixori 4-second cooldown, Shield Bash 4-second cooldown. That would be a very easy, very simple rotation. Yeah, that's another one. So that's another one. Yeah, I didn't even really think of that one. But yeah, at level 35, you could have an Ixori and Shield Bash multi-action. Does need a shield. So yeah, do keep that in mind. Would be quite nice. Okay, moving on. We have Wheels and Gems. So something I'm working on right now is a Tibia tibiapal.com/wheels. As you can see, I have a little website here. You can access it now at the time of this video. However, the links won't be working because I'm waiting for the tests for the rebalance to go live, and then I can update the wheel links. So all those here things on the left here will take you to the Tibia.com wheel plan and show you the wheels that I'm suggesting for a particular level. As you can see, there's a lot of front sweep and combat mastery here now. Very, very good. Very, very good wheels as I'm expecting. I'm also got the best lesser gems and best greater gems suggested here. If something's missing, if you think we should be adding something here, let me know on Discord. Let me know on my Discord server. I'd want to keep this going and keep this updated. Only up to like level 1k though. I don't want to have like 50 different suggested wheels here. And something worth mentioning as well, I mentioned it during the patch notes, but the mitigation gems are now very, very good. They provide 30% mitigation multiplier when upgraded, which means if you have like 3% mitigation, which I believe high-level EKs do, 30% mitigation multiplier is approximately 0.9% flat damage reduction against everything other than agony, which is very, very good. So I do think mitigation gems are going to be the way forward if you can choose them. Of course, if you're running greater gems, then primarily it's the greater gem perk that dictates whatever else you have. You know, it's not like you're going to throw away an executioner's throw mastery greater gem because it doesn't have mitigation on the lesser gem. However, if you do get mitigation on your greater gem as the lesser perk, then you're definitely very, very happy. And on a higher level, if you have just like a couple of lesser gems that you can slot in, for example, in the Gift of Life or the Avatar Quadrant, I do think that the mitigation gems will be the best, most versatile gems going forward. HP, still good, especially for overpower scaling. So if you're hunting something very easy, HP gems are ironically the best offensively because they scale your overpower damage. However, mitigation, I think, is the best overall defensive choice. Elemental resistance, if it works for the particular spot you're hunting, is also very good. Anyways, the wheels you'll be able to access on tibiapal.com/wheels, so do check it out after the rebalance drops. And if you have any suggestions for the gems or the wheels, do let me know. Then we have the potion management changes. Again, I've already spoken about this, but yeah, very, very good changes for the EK. Primarily, what you want is your great mana potions from level 80. Use that as your default mana potion. Never use the distilled superior mana potions. I think they're too expensive for what they offer compared to the great mana potion. However, the distilled ultimate mana potions are very, very nice, especially for tricky situations. For example, definitely use distilled ultimate mana potions when going to like Drome, right? Or if you're like doing some difficult bosses, you need to top up on your mana, heavy mana drain respawns. Distilled ultimate mana potions, very, very, very comfortable. However, they are pretty damn expensive, so do keep that in mind. I do think generally great mana potions are the new default potions for the EKs for 90% of the cases, but you do want to carry some distilled ultimate mana potions as well. That will help you a lot in some of those more tricky situations. Or maybe you're very rich, you don't care about the profit, you just want to vibe and have fun, in which case distilled ultimate mana potions are great. I believe they are level requirement 200, so for the EK, once you hit level 200, you will have those. And finally, just some final thoughts, just basically my summary of what I think happened to the EK. I think the EK primarily is not changing much gameplay wise, it's changing a lot quality of life wise, and gain some nice power tools. It's not going to be like a new vocation or anything, it's not changing as much as a sorcerer, for example, but nevertheless, it's going to be great. You've got the stances, which is an amazing, amazing quality of life. Really love the stances. You get combat mastery and Exori Min, which are very significant power buffs. Very, very nice. You're getting some healing changes, so you get some better sustain and less hotkey spamming, and you get better mana potions, which again, less hotkey spam, very, very comfortable. But you know, none of these change your gameplay all that drastically, right? They just make it nicer, a little bit more damage, which brings us to what still needs improving or is still a bit of an issue for the EK, and that's the high level scaling, both for solo and TH. EK is still limited to his 8 box of monsters, which means that he can't do as much damage. His spells, you know, now even more so with the Exori Min, if that becomes a part of your regular rotation, that hits 3 or 5 creatures, so even more of an issue with like high level scaling. Nevertheless, very nice to play Vocation. I do think the EK becomes the simplest Vocation to play with the healing changes and the mana sustain and the stances. I think EK should be like the go-to character for beginners or returning players. Very, very simple, very, very comfortable, and if well played, still has pretty high peaks in places, you know, at like level 1k. If you really push places like Cobras or Robritas, you know, it's still a pretty nice, powerful Vocation for some good results. So, yeah, overall, I'm very happy with the EK. It's not like amazingly changing in some crazy way like the Sorcerer or whatever, but it's still a very, very good set of changes. Nothing really that is bad for the EK. So, yeah, overall, I'm very happy. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you're looking forward to the EK changes. We'll be having more of these videos for every Vocation coming soon. And, yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think about the rebalance, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.